Good evening, everyone. I'm David Selberg, CEO of Hospice of Santa Barbara. We're so excited to offer this very special town hall format as a part of our Illuminate series. Our Illuminate series has been watched by thousands of individuals here in our local community, as well as around the country and around the world. With this town hall event, we are focusing on our local community to create a chance for us to explore some of the feelings, questions, and challenges surrounding navigating reentry as our community opens back up. Hospice of Santa Barbara thanks all of our attendees tonight for watching, and a very special thank you to the Natalie Orfala Foundation and Lou Buglioli, the Ridley Tree Cancer Center, and the Santa Barbara Foundation for their sponsorship of this entire series. And now I have the pleasure to introduce my colleague at Hospice of Santa Barbara, Charles Caldwell. Charles?
Hi there, David. Thanks so much for that. So excited for tonight and having the opportunity to hear from our wonderful panelists, and also to hear from our community a little bit about what they're experiencing and questions they might have about how they kind of work their way and navigate through this very interesting time that we're all in. I just wanted to share that for this town hall, we thought, what a wonderful opportunity to kind of glean some of the local wisdom that we have, and also to kind of share together, because we're all going through a journey, many of us with different feelings and many of us with very similar feelings as we kind of move our way through this journey of reentry. So tonight, what you'll see is that I'm going to invite all the panelists to introduce themselves. And then I'm going to ask them to share a little bit about what they're seeing out there. What's the first thing that comes to mind when you think of what you're feeling during this time of reentry? For me, I think it might be anxiety. Yeah, it's a little confusing time out there. I'd like to bring on the panelists. Well, thank you all so much for joining us this evening. It should be lively and interesting too. I'm looking forward to hearing what everybody has to say. So I'll just ask you to introduce yourselves, and just kind of going across my screen. Suzanne, if you'd like to start us off.
Sure, I'd be happy to. My name is Suzanne Grimacy. I'm a licensed MFT, and I work with the county's Department of Behavioral Wellness, and I also help at the county's Emergency Operations Center when it's activated. I help as both a public information officer and with community mental health. I want to share a little bit also about my personal experience during the pandemic. I continued to work in person at the Emergency Operations Center throughout the pandemic. It was rewarding, but I missed having that locked in time with my family that many other people did. And I think probably the hardest parts for me was two times. One, when my mom, who was going through treatment for cancer, was at a skilled nursing facility and completely isolated from others. And the other was to watch my youngest child in high school struggling with the at-home learning. But my greatest strength and joy came both from my family as well as my Great Dane fur babies. Thank you.
Thank you, Suzanne. Catherine?
Thank you, Charles. And also thank you to Hospice of Santa Barbara. I feel like this forum was really forward thinking. So I'm honored to be a part of the panel. I'm Catherine Raymock, 30 years in local radio, morning radio with K-Light 101.7. I actually, to be perfectly honest, was surprised when I was asked to be on this panel, because I don't feel like I have any kind of a clinical background. But I am in touch with people, listeners, people in the community, and so sort of have a feel. I don't espouse myself to be an expert. If I was going to say one word right now, especially with this last week and where we're going with the Delta variant, et cetera, I would just say mixed. I feel mixed. I feel like the people that I've spoken to are mixed. So my personal experience is I've been able to remain at work because of the nature of the work that we do. But I do have another job where I've been working from home. So I've been able to see, a lot of different aspects. And I would put people sort of into a couple of categories. And one is they've been waiting so long to get out there and have things, quote, be back to normal, that it's like, we're just going to do this. And then there's another camp that is starting to, again, I think that fear, the anxiety, Charles, that you mentioned is sort of starting to creep in. And I hope what people take away from this evening is that everybody's going to have their own feelings. And it's like, you just have to respect how people are feeling. But, and then I have some other things to share later, but that's sort of a little bit of an overview. So thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Thank you, Catherine. Kristen, would you introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Kristen Rahm, a spiritual care counselor here at Hospice of Santa Barbara. I am a Unitarian Universalist minister and active with Greater Santa Barbara Clergy Association. And COVID for me was maybe easier than some in that no one in my family or immediate circle got ill or died or lost their jobs. What was really a challenge for me was my work, because it is my job to be present with people as they go through the hardest things, and having to overnight figure out how to do that on the phone or on Zoom was a challenge. So that's a nice piece of reentry or reopening, is that that's beginning to shift back, and that work can, if people choose, now be done in person. I was grateful to have a family, I have a husband and 2 grown kids, and that sustained all of us during COVID. And our daughter, who'd been living in Manhattan, ended up coming back and spent 10 of the last 16 months with us here. So that time with her felt like an unexpected gift. And as she's making plans to leave again, that's now feeling sad. And my transition out of COVID is going slowly. And I'm good with that because of the uncertainty. And I really don't want to start driving a lot again. So.
Thank you, Kristen. That's an interesting point too, of kind of the juxtaposition that some people are feeling just as things are opening up, but then something that happened that was wonderful is now they're losing, kind of opposite of what happened before. Susan, would you introduce yourself?
I'd be glad to. Hello, everyone. I'm Susan Salcido, and I serve as the Santa Barbara County Superintendent of Schools, alongside incredible educators and staff and school leaders, in partnership with parents and a lot of community members, on behalf of 70,000 students in Santa Barbara County. And what a year. I think I need to stop right there and say thank you for all of your support, for everyone who's at all related to someone in schools, or who taught, or were instructional staff, or principals, and of course, students and teachers. My home situation was very connected to school. I know it sounds obvious, but it really was true, because my husband, who just finished his 31st year of teaching, taught mostly by Zoom and learned Zoom for the very first time alongside all of the educators. We have a daughter who's in high school, started her freshman year public school, and most of the year was at home, and then went back to a hybrid schedule. And then our son, who's in elementary school, and again, all by Zoom, and went back about in this winter, spring. So most of the year was at home. And so we had a very robust life at work for school and at home for school. And I just want to say, it resonates with me what everyone has said so far, in terms of not a singular emotion at all. And in fact, I feel like in a day, your emotions can change hour to hour, day to day, week to week, phase by phase. And I just so appreciate this opportunity as a community to talk about emotions and feelings and coming back. It's so, so important to identify that for yourself, but also for our community as we move along this together. So really grateful to be here tonight with these incredible panelists, and thanks to Hospice for hosting this.
Mhm. Thank you so much, Susan. And Eddie, would you introduce yourself?
Sure. My name is Eddie Elner, and I've had a yoga studio in town for the last 20 years, Yoga Soup. And you couldn't ask for a business that was more directly impacted than mine. It was, almost overnight. The idea of being next to another person breathing seemed like the most, not only the most dangerous thing, but when would that become something people would be interested in doing again? As we move through the 6 months, 12 months, and the very foundational purpose of what I've been part of and creating and the community that had been established over that time, I kind of lost my way. And of course, it allows the basic, when I see all these comments of relief and fear and uncertainty, confusion, you actually could ask that of anybody on any day, pandemic or no pandemic, and you're going to get that same range of responses, right, as you were talking about, Susan. And so for me personally, it was an opportunity to really practice what I've been preaching for a very long time about basic self-care in the face of circumstances that are never really predictable. I mean, this seems like a much more extreme example, and there isn't a clear path forward, which is really why I'm glad to be part of this dialogue. But you could really say that at any time in life, that anything can happen at any time. So given the extremity of this, what could I do? We retooled, we started teaching in the park, and we started teaching on Zoom, of course, but it wasn't anything like I had, it didn't utilize my skill set. And so without a skill set, who am I? That's a basic question in my business, in my racket. So, and as we move forward, as we're slowly allowed to add people, what I've noticed is a huge appetite to get back into a room and breathe next to other people, which I could have said, but it's been reassuring to know that that's a kind of a fundamental precept maybe of who we are, that we do want to gather, and it will take some time. And so that's where I am.
Great. Well, thank you all for sharing a little bit from your own personal kind of walk through this stage of their journey that we're in. And I think we can all see, as Eddie mentioned, some of the comments that we're hearing in the chat. Whiplash, I thought, was an appropriate one, from hopeful to nervous, anxious, confusion, uncertainty, relief. So a wide variety. So maybe just taking a little bit of time, I'll call on you each again. Maybe you can just share a couple other thoughts. Is those comments that you're seeing in the chat pretty much in keeping with what you're seeing from your kind of network of friends or colleagues or clients? And Susan, I'll just switch things around. I'll start with you.
Great, thank you. I would say absolutely. It really, the rainbow, the spectrum of all of the different emotions, absolutely just feels like what I've been hearing and sensing from people. I know that when there's been a sense of relief in many camps, like, let's go. And then there's been all the other emotions too. How do we do that? How careful? What about being cautious? I want to say that today, I just want to share, today at my organization, I had a first time back meeting in person with a group, about 10 individuals, leaders in our organization. And it was interesting when we walked into the room, following all the protocols, we sat down to start, and one of my team members said, "This is emotional." And we got right into the emotions, and everyone shared their differences in terms of how it feels. And by and large, it felt really good. People were happy to see one another. Oh, it's wonderful to see you. But then we talked about it's emotional to come back. And then we were talking about re-entry, back into all of the spaces related to the organization, and how every individual comes to it with their own feelings, and how it is not about, for us anyway, it's not about judging the feelings. It's about helping to understand the feelings, helping to, it's going to take a different timeline for different individuals. We talked about being emotion scientists versus emotion judges, and really wanting to help people in. And then one other spot I'll say is that we lingered as a team today about really not creating, how can we make sure that we don't create others in this? And we've talked about others a lot over the past year. We talked about race, we talked about all kinds of very dichotomies. And we talked about ensuring that as we move forward as people, as a community, how do we ensure that we're inclusive? When we have see somebody walk in a room with a mask on, next to somebody without a mask on, let's be sure that we're inclusive of all. So that was another piece of our conversations today.
It seems like one of the great challenges as we go through this, feeling everything that we're feeling, is one, how do we treat ourselves with grace? But how do we treat others with grace, especially when they seem to be exhibiting viewpoints that are radically different than what you might be feeling or I might be feeling. And that's a challenging during the whole pandemic. And even now with this, it's still happening because we're in closer proximity with each other. Catherine, how about yourself? As you mentioned earlier, you certainly do have a lot of contact with a lot of people. What are you kind of seeing?
I also resonate with all the comments said. And again, I'm going to go back to it's mixed, and on any given day, it can be mixed. Part of my job that has been difficult over this last 15 months is I've always felt it's sort of my role, and I love it, but it's helping to put the community at ease, and through a lot of different tragedies, right? I mean, we were on the air during 9/11, the debris flow, the fires, and I've always really depended on really good, solid facts and people that I can call on, whether it's the fire chief or whatever information is coming to me. And so what's been difficult is there's been so much mixed information coming to me. So it's kind of weeding through those and giving out all the information, really. I mean, I wish I would never do it, but I wish sometimes I could go in during this last week and not have to say the Delta variant at all, right? But, I'm obligated to. But then I get information. And so, now the CDC and the World Health Organization are on different pages about masks. So where do we go with that? And I think it's just having a conversation, right? So I'm glad we're doing that. And then I think the other thing that I would say is people's comfort level. We're all, very fortunate. I don't know what the demographic is of those that are tuning in, but we can sort of design like what we want. I'm not feeling comfortable, so I'm going to work from home, or I'm going to put a mask on when I go to the grocery store or whatever. But just to give you some perspective, I was talking to a young woman today. She's 21 years old, and she works for the Apple store. And she's been very cautious. She was vaccinated. Her pod of people were vaccinated. And now all of a sudden you've got employees who are have new guidelines that not everybody is comfortable with. So people can browse the store. People can now come up. Now they don't have to wear masks. And so she's like, what? So I feel for the population that can't control their variants. So just in putting that out there, I'm kind of wandering, I know, off topic a little bit, but more on there's a lot of mixed things going on there. And I think really depending on where we are, what our jobs are. I talked to somebody else that has young children. She and her husband are vaccinated, but the kids are too young right now. Hopefully in the next few months they will. But she worries about them and play dates, and she doesn't want to expose them. And so, I think there's just a whole depending on what your family work situation is. So again, it just comes down to respecting how people are taking this in.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you touched on some really important points and kind of perplexing and paradoxical ones with different people. Eddie, just getting back to you, what's your community kind of sharing with you?
Well, it's an open space. Basically that's the context of the business, of the studio, of the philosophy, of the practice, that you walk across the threshold and you feel safe, relaxed. And often that's not possible because of things that are going on in your life or things you're not even aware of. So it's across the board. People are like, I think like what most of us will speak to, that I feel people are scared because there's no definitive pathway. And again, there really is never a definitive pathway, but sometimes it seems like there is. And so here, the opportunity to what can I do in this moment with my fear or anxiety? There are actually things you can do, and that's the basic principles of what a place like ours offers, and so otherwise people come in today, people came in with masks, and some person had a mask on their dog, people are by and large really quite beautiful and crazy and susceptible, and at different times in denial of reality and in lockstep with what someone tells them to do, and then they get rigid in their, it's that kind of stuff. So how can you stay with a basic policy of being alive, just being with your breath, all the kind of, in a way, memes of a yoga practice that are applicable to everyday ordinary life, but in a situation like this really are perhaps more useful than ever. Since there is no definitive path forward, what can I do in any given moment when I'm overcome with anxiety to find my center?
Maybe as we kind of get into the second half and some questions, maybe at the end of our time, you could just share a couple of simple kind of practical things that people can do to kind of help them in their everyday. And Kristen.
So I think it would be helpful to name that spiritually, and whether we consider ourselves religious or not, I would guess that many of us, maybe most of us, have had a bit of bruising to our spirit. I would say that innermost part of us, from this uncertainty and all the months of anxiety, from the loss, from the fact of our very breath and touch being potentially harmful to people we love, I think there's just been some bruising on our spirits that's going to take some time to heal and to fade. And also, I think that as we are coming back together and being able to see one another again in whatever ways we are and that are safe, I think that very comfort and that pleasure gives rise to the emotions that maybe we've been holding tight all of this long time. And so in the midst of an experience we thought might be neutral or happy or celebratory, we might feel this rush of mixed emotions and be really surprised. I think it's just the safety and the comfort allow those things to come forth again. And for us not to be taken too much by surprise by that, but to understand it. And also to know that when we're tired or not at our best, that rush of emotion might come out what I call sideways, looking more like annoyance or maybe short-temperedness or snarkiness instead of other things. And not to be too taken aback by that either, but to give each other some grace around that. I know some of my colleagues have mentioned that as their communities are coming back together, there is some celebration and some happiness and that just deep pleasure of being together. And then there might be some disagreements or some arguments that they hadn't expected. And I think that might be that sideways thing for us to just be on the lookout for. And to know that, we need to, I think we're all kind of getting to this, accessing this piece of information that we need to be able to feel the hard and difficult and uncomfortable emotions so that we also can feel the joy and the celebration and the happiness of coming back together. So we have to kind of make a space for all of it. And just a reminder that we can't fix all of this. There's with our best thinking or with a lot of solutions, it's more making space and being present and being patient and being curious as we allow this to unfold and all of us to come forward together, because we're not going to be able to go back to 2019. We have to create some new ways as we move forward together.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. And as I get ready to call on you, Suzanne, just to the audience out there. So if, as you've been kind of thinking this, some questions are kind of arising with that you'd like to ask the panel, you might kind of gather those thoughts and you can enter those into the Q&A. And we can ask the panel in general, or if there's questions for anybody in particular, we can work with that too and just have some good discussion around what we're kind of hearing from the community. So if you have a question, you can start typing away. And Suzanne?
Thank you, Charles. And thank you again to Hospice of Santa Barbara for this panel. I enjoyed so much listening to everyone speak and resonate so well with everything shared. The pandemic has had a major effect on our lives, including taking the lives of 457 of our community members from us. And now, as we start to return to previous activities in a safe way, as people have shared, many people are feeling mixed emotions. Some have shared feeling ready to jump back into big social events. Some have shared not feeling ready, and both are absolutely okay and perfectly normal. Some have even shared feeling pressure from family and friends to get out again and step outside their comfort zone, and not being quite ready to do so. Anxiety and stress, which I've heard many people share, are very normal reactions to situations when our minds sense that something could be harmful to us. Our bodies are actually doing their jobs by alerting us. And with the reopening, there's so many unknowns, as I've heard everyone share. It's not only normal to feel uneasy and scared, but it actually makes complete sense. The more unknown a situation is, or the more unknowns, the less control that we feel we have, and the more our feelings of anxiety and stress and fear go up. We can very much make it through this together, as we have so many times before as a community, by honoring and recognizing our individual and our shared and collective feelings that we're feeling very much together right now. And then even reshaping them in a way that shows ourselves and shows others compassion, kindness, patience, and as I've heard several of you share, grace. Thank you so much.
Great. Well, thank you all so much for sharing. I feel like it's really helps to, I think, just hear from others that that there's such a wide variety of feelings as we've been kind of talking about, and it is really challenging. For many of us, there's a lot of, I don't know, just kind of challenges, I think, as people are kind of wrestling with different viewpoints. And I see we're starting to get some questions, and we'd gotten a few questions in before all this started. So I just wanted to kind of touch base on one of those. And this is one actually around children. And it was a question about, how can I cope with the anxiety and fear of my children going back to school? And Susan, do you want to maybe take a crack at some thoughts around that as well?
What a thoughtful question. And I think it's one that parents with children have been really grappling with all year long. You know, how are our children doing? And each child is so different in how they're reacting. And so here we are with talking about going back in the fall. And so, you know, there's lots of emotion around that. I'll say, you know, in speaking with teachers and parents, speaking with children, the reactions from children themselves have been so varied. The theme we've talked about, very, very different to their individual. From some children who were blaming themselves. I must have done something wrong to have closed school. To those who were thriving in an online environment for the first time. To those who couldn't, you know, really wait to go back, but were disappointed that they weren't back in a hybrid fashion, 2 days a week or 3 days a week. I mean, the variety of emotion from children themselves were all over the place. And I think that a question that you're asking, Charles, around an individual saying, how do I prepare my students? I will say this. I'll say, in working very, very, very closely with the school leaders of each of the schools, private, public, independent, parochial, charter, every school leader wants their environment at their school sites to be ready, safe, welcoming, prepared. They are there. The school leaders are there, and the teachers are there to welcome students, to take them wherever they are, understand their feelings, and welcome them into their classrooms. And it's not easy. Going to kindergarten, for example, for the first time in a pandemic situation can be challenging. Going to ninth grade, you know, not in a pandemic, all of that can be challenging. But here it can be a really challenging space. I think I froze, so I need to stop speaking here and see if I.
Sure. I just wanted to say, Susan, I have so much respect for what you do. The job you undersold in the beginning about just the depth and breadth of what you're dealing with and over the last year. But I just want to share a couple of fun stories because we have a lot of family listeners. So Eddie, I heard you say how people can't wait to come back in and be a part of the yoga and sit and breathe next to each other. And so we've got a lot of families, and the kids will call in, but some really great stories about kids that are so excited also to go back to school. I'm not saying the other part isn't there, I know. But one of my favorites, because my son is no longer a teenager, came from a woman who has a 14-year-old. He was 13 before the pandemic, and she could never get him out of bed. And she said, now, let's just say his name is Chuck. I don't know what it was, but you know, Chuck is saying, Mom, are we ready to go to school yet? Come on, Mom, let's go. So I think there's an enthusiasm too, which I really celebrate. And I'm glad as well. I can't remember who said it, but maybe Charles, it was you when you were starting, that when we started to go to a lot of the virtual events, were people going to want to get back to being live? And maybe it was you, Eddie, and yes, they do. So I think that's been really heartening on this side to hear.
Great. Well, yeah, I think for the panelists too is I'll just kind of keep things moving with some additional questions. But if you have something, Catherine, that was great, where you just kind of raised your finger. And Eddie, this is a question that seems directed to you. That's an interesting one about, are there any particular areas of the body during a time like this that seem to need more attention than others? And any kind of suggestions of how people might address that or assist with that?
Yes, I would say certainly our nervous system is on constant alert. You know, just reading the newspaper, or you know, keeping track of the kind of intangible guidelines that you know keep changing. So I don't know if it's fortunately or unfortunately, but the basic allowing yourself a space where you can let your body relax. And what will happen most likely is, if you can stay with it long enough, you'll notice that your body isn't relaxed. You'll notice that there are parts that, no matter what you do, but you have to stay with it in order to discover that. It's like anything. You have to kind of stick with it a little bit beyond your comfort zone to realize, oh, that is exactly the place that I need to address. And I have a lot of different ways of looking at it, but it's like holding the door open for somebody struggling with packages. So if you go into your heart and you take a breath into your heart, and then on the exhale you drop your shoulders and you drop your armpits. This is not, this is really simple, basic. You go into your organs of digestion, how you get nourished, and you relax, and because a lot of us hold tension in the stomach, and a lot of us hold tension in our brain. So you go into your brain, and there's a famous expression you've all heard in yoga, namaste, but really what it means is two things that seem separate disappear into not being separate. So someone wearing a mask, not wearing a mask, black, white, the whole. But in terms of our own body, you let your teeth and your gums melt into each other, and your hair and your scalp. And it's not often the problem that we're grappling with in our professional life. We have paperwork, we have meetings, we have emails. This is a much more personal. It's like you're giving yourself time to really, regardless of all the advice coming at you, you're giving yourself the opportunity to discover something that's inherent and always available to you, which is easy to lose. It's easy to lose that relationship to just your natural body because of all what's going on outside.
Mm-hmm.
So specifically a body part, really pick anything, and then offer it some kind of like devoted awareness, a little bit of kindness, and then let it teach you. Let it kind of, instead of waiting for it to do something, just, or expecting it to do something rather, just wait and sit in actually what will end up being some discomfort, so to practice sitting in that kind of discomfort.
Right. Yeah. As you were just talking a little bit about like your hair and your scalp melting into each other, I felt myself relaxing a little bit. There's something about that kind of joining or melting image. Susan.
I thank you, Charles. I wanted to say, Catherine, thank you for picking up. I think I got disconnected there and I heard what you were saying. So really appreciate that, fellow panelist there and friend. And Eddie, I just want to say a quick reaction to what you're saying. Sometimes I get so concerned, I know we all do, about community members who have under-resourced. They don't have opportunities that everyone else has. And for reasons, whether it's socioeconomic, all kinds of factors. What I so appreciate, Eddie, about what you said in terms of the breathing and mindful and thinking and support is that it really doesn't hinge on whether or not you have or have not. It really is, it doesn't matter what space you're in, whether you're in the car, what kind of house you live in. I just so appreciate what you said.
Mm-hmm. Great. Thank you, Susan. Kristen.
Wanted to follow up, and again, what a rich panel this is. I wish that I didn't have to pay so much attention to so I could just listen to all of you. I would offer, just as a simple tool, something I have been finding people really liking is just if feeling anxious or feeling unsettled, is just to place our hand on our own heart and take a breath or two. And kids can do it, anyone can do it. And it just helps in that moment. And the warmth of our own hand can feel really soothing and remind us to come out of the head and all of the thoughts and into the body and the breath.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Ouch. I would also like to react to that. What you said, I think, Eddie, and what others are saying too, is so rich and so powerful. In the mental health world, many times people will come to get help, to stop feeling a certain way, to not feel anxious, or to take away the stress. And that's a good thing. It's wonderful when people reach out for help. But what you shared, I think, is so very true about leaning into accepting the feelings that you're feeling in every part of your body and your mind and your body parts as being a part of the experience that we're going through now, and being curious about it, paying attention to the feelings with a mindfulness approach. I'm a very big believer that it's not an experience itself that shapes the longer term impacts. It's our experience with, or not an event itself, it's our experience with that event. And we have the ability right now to shape what our experience is as we continue through the pandemic and shape our own mental health. And I think I'd share, lastly, as a part of that, is how important it is not only to do that, your own mindfulness, but to stay connected and share your experiences with that with other people, and share what you're experiencing, hear what other people are, because that's ultimately what are going to shape us individually and as a community.
Great. And this was a rich kind of dialogue about what are some of the kinds of things that we kind of might be able to do, just basic things, is kind of moving forward for feelings that we're all feeling to differing degrees. And I wanted to just move on to another question, just so we can reach a few different kinds of images. And then somebody said, does anybody have suggestions for how to engage with family members that are refusing to be vaccinated, but who want to engage with the family in all ways? Many people do not want unvaccinated people in our homes. What do we say to them? I'll just open that up to all of you.
I'll start. I think it's important to be able to allow yourself to set limits and to set boundaries and to share the way you're feeling. It's perfectly okay to ask someone to wear a mask when they're around you. Maybe ask someone what their reason is that they do wear a mask, that they don't wear a mask. But most importantly, to let people know what your comfort level is. We're all at different places right now. There's not a right or wrong. But to be able to share verbally out loud and, have that freedom of setting limits and setting boundaries and being able to say no at times.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I agree with Susan. I'm not the expert here at all, but I do think having that inner dialogue with yourself before you get into situations is really, truly important. And so think about what you want to say to that family member, set your boundaries. We've just decided as a family that we really want to include you, so we can FaceTime you. We still want to, but this is an important thing to us. But just on the subject of influence, I think it's fascinating, and I'm sure that a lot of people know this out there, but you could have a million PSAs, right? And commercials about wearing masks. But what the number one influencer is, if people are going to wear masks, when we were trying to get them to wear masks, other people wearing masks. So if people went into a situation where and now it's sort of the opposite. So people aren't. So again, an inner dialogue with yourself. If you want to wear a mask, don't worry about the fact that other people aren't wearing a mask. And then just really quickly, I was at an event over the weekend. It was outdoors. There was about 50 to 60 people there, and that was wonderful. And then at one point there was a video presentation and people were asked to come inside. And all of a sudden there were a few people that looked and they saw this crowded room. You wouldn't have seen it a week and a half ago. Some people were very comfortable in there. And some people I could tell, were, can I step out? Should I step out? Am I going to offend anybody? And so again, this inner dialogue, like what are my limits before you get into situations, I think is a really good thing.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah. And a kind of related question, somebody kind of bring it even more close to home. Robin had asked a question around, as she's on this talk right now in the live moment. Her husband had just walked in from being out in public and engaging with others, and that he's very happy and energized and getting lots of kind of energy and excited. And then she returns, her first reaction is, "Oh no, wash your hands, yikes." And she mentions that it's kind of complex interpersonal dynamics, even in our kind of deepest relationships. How not even when it's somebody outside the house or somebody at work, how do we deal with that with even our closest loved ones? Mm-hmm.
You know, I'll just jump in and hook on to Suzanne and Catherine. Your response can be, I was going to say, it can be very similar in that, you know, I think if we're able to be honest with ourselves, even with reacting sometimes in a reactive way. Oh my goodness, I can't believe I just reacted that way. That's just where I am right now. Or, you know, it makes me really nervous when you've been outside, and I'd really love it if you help me by washing your hands, you know, just to be able to express it honestly. I think that's where, Suzanne, I was hearing you say, and Catherine hearing you say, it's really getting to your genuine reaction, your genuine self, and being able to articulate that. It's not always easy to do, but I think if we allow ourselves a space to do that, your loved ones want to know how to be at home in peace with you. So I would just say that being able to really think about what's your true reaction, being able to articulate that is very helpful.
Mm-hmm. Great. Anybody have any thoughts that they wanted to add to that? Or
I think following on all these wise words, that it all starts with us doing enough self-care that we can be calm enough in the moment to even track what we're feeling and what's going on, especially when something comes up unexpectedly, you know, like the excellent question that Robin has put in. And the closer someone is to us, the harder it may be to hold a calm center and really track our own process and be able to share it honestly and compassionately and kindly and clearly.
Yeah. Eddie.
I'm a little hesitant to go down this road, but what the heck? I think it's appropriate that, you know, of course, this is being hosted by Hospice, which encourages a lack of denial towards the inevitable process of life, and in doing that, it can become this really inclusive, awe-inspiring instead of terrifying ordeal. You know, that's the invitation. And, you know, I come from a generation where there weren't, you know, people were drinking out of garden fountains and, you know, the usual no seat belts, and, you know, you just were kind of free to do your thing. And of course it wasn't a pandemic, but it's always that ability to stop and say, what have I become hyper vigilant around things that I can't control? And how is it affecting my body? And you go back through the, you know, the roll call of relax your armpits and let go of your face. And you realize, oh, it's not a thing. Like, it's, you know, it's like the only thing to fear is fear itself. You know, it's that. It's like this invisible, pervasive thing that we think we can protect ourselves from, but actually there's nothing out there. You know, and obviously there's a pandemic, there is something out there, but the degree to which we're fortifying ourselves, you know, we have to see what kind of straitjacket we're creating and it is an individual choice. It's not like anyone's doing it right or wrong. It's just the opportunity to observe yourself. That's always what's at play.
Mm-hmm.
And that's going to provide a lot of uncomfortable and also liberating and illuminating answers.
Mm-hmm. But interesting, it kind of touches on another kind of question as you were kind of talking about, yeah, the way that all of us are kind of deeply impacted in differing ways. And somebody had asked a question, and Suzanne, I'm going to kind of direct this first at you, which is kind of related to kind of the burgeoning mental health issues that we're seeing in kind of multiple areas. And the question's kind of around a little bit like what's changing and what's being done differently. And maybe just to kind of personalize that a little bit more, because that, of course, is a massive, with your work on the community wellness team, you could enumerate all the different kinds of areas. But what is it that's kind of emerging, like most prevalently, that we're kind of seeing? And then as you answer, because this kind of gets to a core thing of all of our struggles a little bit during this time, maybe we can kind of move around the panel and kind of share, as have already been done. You've already been sharing some wonderful kind of tips and ideas on what we can do. But maybe as we kind of think about what is the kind of some of the prevalent disturbances people are feeling, then we can go around and just hear what each one of us is doing, what we're hearing other people are doing, and just elaborate a little bit of that, because it's hard to believe, but we're running out of time. I feel like we've just barely scratched the surface, but we find with the Zoom format that an hour is a time that works for kind of most people. And so, Suzanne, what do you think is kind of happening out there?
I'd love to start that, and I will be very intentional about being brief because I'd love to hear what others say too. But you know, the American Psychological Association did a study a few months ago, and they found that nearly half, 49%, of people who responded said they felt uneasy about the returning to, I won't say post-pandemic, but returning to this adjustment to getting back in the swing of social events. And it wasn't unique to people that had been vaccinated or unvaccinated. It's about 49% of everyone was reporting feeling that. So feelings of anxiousness, feeling uneasy, mixed emotions, all the things we talked about are very prevalent. And I think that lends to that feeling of feeling like there's a sense of loss of control. And it's so important for us to remember that there are so many things that we can't control right now, but there are so many things that we can. And maybe as we've had to sit and stare at Zoom screens and little dots and really pay attention to people's facial expressions, maybe one of the silver linings is that we've sharpened our skills of discernment. You know, maybe we've been able to look a little more closely at what's essential, what's most important in life. Maybe we've been able to uncommit a little bit from extra weight and pay attention to the simpler and more important things. Maybe we've learned to be able to filter for what really matters. And so, yes, I think we're at large seeing feelings of loss of control, of anxiousness, aloneness. Depression has been heightened in some, but I'm hoping that also we've seen that new learning of discernment and filtering for what really, really matters.
Mm-hmm. Great. Thank you. I think you've put your finger on a wide body of things that are all kind of contiguous to each other in all of us. So as we kind of wrap up just along that same lines, would anybody like to kind of go next with some kind of final thoughts around what Suzanne was just sharing, and also just kind of some kind of action steps or thoughts that people might think and take away from this evening into their regular lives?
I have very briefly. I also, Suzanne, share your same hope that we appreciate one another. We have a new word that we didn't use before, and that was our pods. And I think it's really interesting that we've developed our friendship pods. And then, you know, as we were vaccinated, then we got to celebrate with those pods first, if you were anything like I was. For me, and this may sound strange, coming from someone who is inundated by news and giving it out on a daily basis, but I find it really helpful. Action step, get away from it. My weekends are generally spent putting my phone aside and walking for just hours. I love to walk Santa Barbara. So I invite other people that, as hard as it is, I even have a favorite Sunday morning news show that I've put aside and taped, and I'll watch at a different time. I just kind of have to, so let yourself go from the news and the input if you haven't done that. And listen to lots of music, like that's on Key Light 101.7.
That's wonderful advice on multiple fronts.
I'll jump in and say again that, ditto everything Suzanne and Catherine and everyone has said tonight. One of the things I like to ask when I'm engaging with a friend is, what's been a silver lining? Yeah, what's been a silver lining in all of this? And when we frame it, a question like that, we can think about what we've been grateful for, even when it's been so challenging. So I offer that as a framing question. And then secondly, I'll say that I picked up a book last night that I haven't picked up for a long time. It's an author, the author's Mark Brackett, and he comes out of he founded at Yale an emotional intelligence center. And his book is called Permission to Feel. And I just say that because sometimes people want to go to a book. Sometimes they want to go to K-Light. Sometimes they want to go to yoga. And sometimes you just want to pick up a book. And what I really appreciated, and I'm going to show something, it's part of the book, but he talks about this, and all you need to know is that there's some quadrants here on emotions. But the point was, and it can be in different quadrants at different times. The point what he was trying to say is, in these rectangles, they're all names of emotions. They're all words that name precisely how you're feeling at the moment. Not that it needs to be one, but what I appreciated is that he was saying, it's really helpful to name what you're feeling and be really precise about it if you can, just as you, Charles, asked people to do earlier, because when you name it, then you can really begin to address it. And that's one of the points that he was talking about. And of course, none of the emotions are bad. It's not a judgment call. It's just to help identify where you are and maybe where your colleagues are or your friends are too. So I offer a couple of those pieces as we near signing off here tonight.
Great. And I'll ask you, Eddie, and then Kristen, I'll ask you to kind of close. So Eddie, very briefly for like 30 seconds at some of the things you've mentioned, but any last words of kind of advice or just an offering of what somebody might do?
Come in, it's not the first instinct or option, because I want to fortify, I want to put plywood against, I want to keep things out. So without not doing that, at the same time, give equal weight to a moment where you're just, even if it's just laying down on the ground, letting the ground support you, and then slowly taking a few breaths and exhale. I wish I had a more complicated offering, but it's really effective, and it's like a gateway program, because it will lead you unexpectedly to other places in which things can unravel. You have to start somewhere, and there's too much information, too much paradox, conflicting information to try to always make sense of it with your mind. The more you can offer it to yourself, the more you can offer it to others.
Great. And Kristen, a last thought for people?
Well, thank you to my fellow panelists for all the wisdom and the wise words. And I would say, I would offer what has been suggested before, to practice some things. Practice gratitude. 3 things that we're grateful for. And to also practice trust. We don't think of that often, but practice trust. As Eddie said, lay on the floor, trust it to hold you. Trust your breath to come. Trust the light to return every day. And then to just remind all of us how one of the big lessons of this pandemic is how interconnected we all are. We are tied to one another through the best and the worst, and let that be a source of support and light and sustenance. Remember that connectedness that we all share.
Great. But I know we're out of time, and so I just want to thank each and every one of you. I really do feel like we've just begun the conversation, and I just want to continue it with all of you, and of course with the community as well. So thank you all so much for attending. And as we wrap up, I just want to invite the community out to our future Illuminate speakers. They're all free. You just have to register. You can find the information in the chat right now. Nora McInerney is wonderful, is coming up next month. And finish on just sharing that if you'd like to support our work here with Illuminate in helping get the word out about these free services and you'd like to support that, then please go to our website and consider making a donation to support us. And with that, thank you all so very much. We appreciate you and glad to be in community together.